The house groaned. It was a low, guttural sound, the protest of old timber straining against a force it was never meant to endure. Outside, Hurricane Agnes was throwing a Category 3 tantrum, turning the coastal North Carolina sky into a churning vortex of black and gray. For Sarah Jenkins, the howl of the wind was just a deeper, more primal version of the sterile chaos she'd left behind an hour ago. 36 hours in the ER. 36 hours of beeps, shouts, the slick slide of blood on vinyl gloves, and the desperate rattling breaths of the dying. The storm, in a way, was a relief. Its violence was simple, impersonal. It wanted nothing from her. She stood in her small kitchen, the lights flickering in a frantic Morse code, and watched rain move not down, but sideways, like a solid sheet of water being dragged across the glass. Exhaustion was a physical weight on her shoulders, a gritty film behind her eyes. She was 38, a year out from a divorce that had felt more like an amputation, and bone-deep tired of putting broken things back together. People, mostly. She moved on autopilot, her body a slave to the muscle memory of 1,000 exhausting shifts. Coffee maker, filter, grounds, water, the button. The routine was an anchor in the gale, a small pocket of order in a world gone mad. Then came the sound. It wasn't the roar of the wind or the crack of a falling branch. It was a frantic, desperate thump, 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 so out of place in the symphony of destruction that for a moment she thought she'd imagined it. A hallucination brought on by caffeine and sleep deprivation. It came again, sharper this time. A fist against her front door. Every instinct, every news report about looters and opportunists screamed at her. Don't. You are a woman alone. This is how the horror movies start. But then, beneath the wind's shriek, she heard it. A low groan. It wasn't the sound of a threat. It was the sound of pain. It was the sound of the ER. Cursing herself, her job, her bleeding heart conscience, Sarah moved to the door. The deadbolt felt cold and heavy in her hand. She turned it, her heart hammering against her ribs, and pulled the door inward. The hurricane immediately tried to invade, a blast of wind and water shoving her back. And there, collapsing onto her porch, was a man. He was a heap of soaked limbs and dark clothing, a dark puddle already forming around him. She saw the gash on his temple first, an ugly, weeping line matted with wet hair and blood. He was young, maybe 25, with the hard, lean build of an athlete. He tried to push himself up, his movements clumsy and uncoordinated. "Please," he rasped, his voice swallowed by the storm. "Just for a bit." Her training took over, a cool, clear wave washing over the fear. She saw not a threat but a patient. Head trauma, probable concussion, risk of hypothermia. She grabbed him under the arms, his wet jacket slick in her hands, and hauled. He was heavier than he looked, a dead weight of muscle and bone. She grunted with the effort, dragging him across the threshold and kicking the door shut against the raging storm. The world suddenly became quiet, muffled. The only sounds were the howling wind outside and his ragged, shallow breathing on her floor. She knelt beside him, her fingers going to his neck to check his pulse. Strong, but thready. His skin was cold, clammy. "Hey, can you hear me? Can you tell me your name?" His eyes fluttered open. They were a startlingly clear blue, but unfocused, the pupils uneven. A definite concussion. "Alex," he mumbled, his speech slurred. "My name is Alex." She went to work. Blankets from the closet, her trauma kit from the car always ready, a habit she couldn't shake. She cleaned the wound on his head, applied a butterfly bandage, and checked him for other injuries. As she cut away a piece of his torn, soaked shirt, a glint of metal caught her eye. It was a dog tag chain. Tucked inside his wallet, its leather warped and swollen with water, she found a military ID. The photo was of a serious young man in a crisp uniform. Corporal Alex Wolf Petrov, USMC. The base listed was Camp Lejeune, less than 50 miles away. A Marine. Out here, in the middle of a hurricane, injured and alone. Every official protocol screamed that she should call the base, call the police, report him. But the phone lines were dead, and the nearest road was likely a river by now. And there was something in his delirious murmurs, phrases like, "can't go back," and "they wouldn't listen," that gave her pause. He wasn't just a soldier caught in a storm. He was a soldier running from something. She looked at his face, now slack with unconsciousness, and saw not a soldier, but one of the countless young men she'd patched up in the ER, scared, hurt, and alone. She made a decision. It was a choice made not in her head, but in her gut. The same instinct that told her when a patient was about to crash. The rules could wait. The authorities could wait. Tonight, he wasn't Corporal Petrov. He was just Alex. And he was her patient. She pulled another blanket over him, sat back on her heels, and listened to the storm, now a willing accomplice to her quiet act of rebellion. The world returned not with a bang, but with a drip. A steady, rhythmic plink-plonk from a leak in the corner of the living room was the first sound to pierce the unnatural silence of the morning after. Hurricane Agnes had moved on, leaving behind a world washed clean and utterly broken. Through the windows, Sarah could see a sky of bruised purple and soft gray. The neighbor's oak tree, a landmark for 50 years, lay snapped in half, its leafy crown splayed across the road like a fallen giant. She had spent the night on the recliner, a shotgun her ex-husband had insisted she keep resting across her lap. She hadn't slept, instead listening to the dual symphony of the storm outside and the stranger's breathing inside. Now, in the pale light of dawn, she saw he was awake. He was sitting up, propped against her sofa, watching her with an unnerving stillness. The wariness in his clear blue eyes was a palpable force. "Morning," she said, her voice rough with fatigue. She stood, setting the shotgun aside, an unspoken signal that the immediate threat from him or the storm had passed. "How's your head?" "Feels like a drill sergeant's using it for target practice," he replied, his voice a dry rasp. The slur was gone. "Where am I?" "My house. You collapsed on my porch last night. You've got a concussion, a few nasty cuts, but nothing seems to be broken." "I'm Sarah, by the way. I'm a nurse." He absorbed this, his gaze sweeping the room, cataloging exits, windows, potential threats. It was a professional assessment, and it sent a shiver down her spine. "Why didn't you call the cops?" he asked, his voice flat. "Phone lines are down, and you didn't seem like the kind of trouble that needed a cop." She moved to the kitchen, the floorboards creaking. "You need water and food. And you need to tell me why a Marine is wandering around in a hurricane instead of being on base." She brought him a glass of water and a protein bar. He took them, his movements precise, economical. He ate and drank in silence, his eyes never leaving her. The trust was a fragile, unbuilt thing between them. Finally, he spoke. "I'm AWOL," he said, the words stark in the quiet room. He didn't say it like a confession, but like a statement of fact. "I had to leave." Sarah leaned against the counter, crossing her arms. She'd seen this before in the ER, the flat affect, the emotional shielding of someone who had seen too much. "Why?" He looked down at the half-eaten bar in his hand, and for the first time, the soldier's mask cracked, revealing the tired young man beneath. "My last tour, something happened. It was a snafu, a total command screw-up. Bad intel, faulty equipment. We walked into an ambush we were never supposed to see. 2 guys from my unit, kids, really. They didn't walk out." He paused, and Sarah remained silent, giving him the space to continue. This was like lancing a wound. It had to come out at its own pace. "The official report called it a training accident during adverse weather conditions," he said, the words dripping with a bitterness so profound it felt like acid. "They erased what happened. They erased them. I tried to report it. I went to my CO, then his superior. I filed a formal complaint. I had logs, comms, transcripts, proof." He reached into the pocket of his torn pants and pulled out a small, ruggedized flash drive, holding it up. "It looked impossibly small to hold the weight of 2 lives. The moment I filed that report, my life became hell. I was put on psych evaluation. It was suggested my PTSD was making me unreliable. I was inventing memories. I was threatened in the mess hall. My locker was tossed. They were building a case to discredit me, to bury me and my report under a mountain of paperwork that said I was crazy. They weren't just covering it up. They were trying to erase me too." Sarah felt a cold knot form in her stomach. It was a story she'd heard in hushed tones from veteran patients at the hospital. The system turning on its own, protecting its image at the cost of its people. "So you ran," she stated, not as an accusation. "I had to," he insisted, his eyes finally meeting hers, pleading for her to understand. "There's a journalist in Raleigh, an investigative reporter who specializes in military affairs. He agreed to meet me, to see my evidence. I was on my way to him when the storm hit. My truck hydroplaned, went into a ditch. I must have hit my head, then I just started walking." He slumped back against the sofa, the story draining the last of his energy. "They aren't just looking for a soldier who's AWOL, Sarah. They're looking for a whistleblower. They can't afford for this drive to get out." Sarah stared at the small piece of plastic and metal in his hand. It was proof. It was justice. And it was sitting in her living room, which now felt less like a sanctuary and more like ground zero. She had let him in to save him from the storm, but the real storm wasn't the hurricane. It was the vast, powerful, and ruthless institution that Alex had dared to challenge. And by giving him shelter, she had walked directly into its path. Her mind raced through the implications harboring a fugitive, obstruction of justice. Her career, her quiet life, all of it was balanced on a knife's edge. But then she looked at Alex, at the desperation etched onto his young face, and thought of her own brother, who had come back from his service, a haunted stranger, whispering about things the military had told him to forget. In that moment, the choice became terrifyingly simple. She could protect herself, or she could protect him. She pushed herself off the counter and walked over to the window, looking out at the mangled oak tree. "Okay, Alex," she said, her voice steady, her decision made. "Let's get you some real food. We need to figure out how to get you and your story out of here." The quiet of the morning was a fragile veneer. By midday, it had been irrevocably shattered. It didn't start with a siren or a shout, but with the low, menacing crunch of tires on the debris-strewn asphalt of her street. Sarah was changing the dressing on Alex's head wound when she saw them through the window. Two immaculate black SUVs, so out of place in the storm-ravaged neighborhood they looked like they'd been beamed down from another planet. They parked directly in front of her house, blocking her driveway, a silent, vehicular statement of intent. Alex, who had been sitting at the kitchen table, went rigid. The color drained from his face. "They're here." The passenger door of the lead vehicle opened, and a man stepped out. He was in his 50s, wearing a perfectly pressed service uniform that seemed to repel the surrounding humidity and grime. His movements were economical and precise as he adjusted his jacket, revealing the single, gleaming star on his collar. He walked up the path to her front door, flanked by two stone-faced military police officers, their hands resting casually on the sidearms holstered at their hips. Sarah's heart began to pound a frantic, heavy rhythm against her ribs. This was it, the point of no return. She took a deep breath, the way she did before entering a trauma bay, and walked to the door, opening it just enough to block the entrance with her body. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice impressively steady. The man in charge, the general, gave her a smile that was entirely devoid of warmth. It was a precise, calculated arrangement of facial muscles. "Ma'am, I am Brigadier General Marcus Thorne. I believe you have something that belongs to the United States Marine Corps in your house. We're here to take possession of our property." The word chilled her to the bone. Property. He didn't say soldier, or Marine, or even Corporal Petrov. He spoke as if Alex were a misplaced rifle. "I'm sorry, General, but I don't know what you're talking about," she lied, her pulse thundering in her ears. Thorne's smile didn't falter, but his eyes hardened into chips of granite. "Ma'am, let's not waste each other's time. We tracked Corporal Petrov's GPS signature from his vehicle to this location before the storm knocked it out. He is a deserter, and you are currently harboring a fugitive. Open the door, and this can be a simple, discreet matter." From behind her, Alex's voice was a low growl. "Don't do it, Sarah." That was all the confirmation Thorne needed. He nodded to himself. "I see. Well, we can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way." "He is medically unfit for transport," Sarah snapped, falling back on the one language she knew held authority. "He has a severe concussion and requires observation. As his caregiver, I will not release him into any situation that could endanger his health. He is my patient." Thorne actually looked amused. "You're a civilian nurse, Miss Jenkins. You are not his caregiver. You are an obstacle. You have 5 minutes to hand him over before I am forced to escalate this." She stood her ground. 5 minutes passed in suffocating silence. Thorne, true to his word, pulled out his phone. Less than 10 minutes later, a county sheriff's car rolled up, its lights flashing silently. 2 deputies got out, looking uncomfortable and out of their depth. The older deputy, a man with a kind, weathered face, approached her. "Ma'am," he began, his voice low and apologetic. "This is General Thorne. He's telling us you're obstructing a military operation." "I'm protecting my patient," she countered, her voice rising. "This man is a general, not a doctor. He can't make a medical determination." The deputy winced, glancing nervously over his shoulder at Thorne, who watched the exchange with cold indifference. "Ma'am, with all due respect, our hands are tied here. This is a federal matter now. He's a soldier, and he belongs to them. Please, just let them take the boy. Don't get yourself into a world of trouble over this." The frustration was a hot, bitter taste in her mouth. These men were supposed to protect her, to uphold the law, but they were cowering before a uniform and a star. Their powerlessness was infuriating. "I can't do that," she said, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and anger. Seeing the stalemate, Thorne made another call. This time, the attack was more personal. Sarah's cell phone rang, and the caller ID showed the main line for her hospital. She answered it, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. It was Dr. Evans, the hospital administrator, and he was incandescent with rage. "Sarah, what in God's name do you think you're doing? I just got off the phone with a one-star general who tells me you're harboring a fugitive and obstructing the military. Are you insane? Dr. Evans, there's a man here who needs medical—" "I don't care if he needs a heart transplant on your kitchen table," Evans shouted, his voice tinny and shrill over the phone. "Our hospital has millions of dollars in federal grants and contracts with the Department of Defense. You are jeopardizing this entire institution with this idiotic bleeding heart stunt. You are suspended, effective immediately. And I swear to you, if you do not stand down right now, I will personally see to it that your nursing license is put under review for gross insubordination and unprofessional conduct. Do you understand me? Stop playing hero and give them the damned soldier." The line went dead. Sarah stood there, the phone still pressed to her ear, the words echoing in the silence. Liability, contracts, insubordination. Not a single question about her safety. Not a flicker of concern for the injured man in her house. She was just a cog in the machine, and she was grinding the gears. She lowered the phone, her hand trembling. She looked from the helpless deputies to the implacable general. They were all part of the same unfeeling system, a massive engine designed to crush anything that didn't move in its prescribed direction. And right now, it was aimed directly at her. The situation devolved with alarming speed. A neighbor, peeking through their blinds at the strange convergence of military and police vehicles, made the call that transformed Sarah's front lawn from a standoff to a spectacle. The first news van to arrive was from a local affiliate, its satellite dish unfolding like a metallic flower. Within the hour, it was joined by two others. The quiet, storm-ravaged street was now a chaotic jumble of cameras, microphones, and reporters shouting questions that no one was answering. General Thorne's face was a mask of controlled fury. His quiet, efficient retrieval operation had metastasized into a public relations nightmare. He dispatched an aide, a clean-cut captain with practiced, empty eyes, to feed the media a carefully curated narrative. Sarah watched through the window as the captain spoke into a cluster of microphones, his voice carrying in the humid air. He used words like disturbed veteran, potential threat, and unfortunate desertion. He painted Alex as a volatile, unstable man and Sarah as a well-meaning but misguided civilian who was naively endangering herself and the community. The lie was so blatant, so calmly delivered, it made her feel sick. "He's turning me into a crazy person, and you into his hostage," Alex said grimly, watching beside her. Thorne, clearly impatient with the drawn-out siege, decided to force the issue. He brought in his own medical authority. A military doctor, a man with a severe face and a major's insignia on his collar, strode up to the door carrying a black medical bag. "Miss Jenkins," Thorne announced, his voice booming with false authority. "I am ordering a medical assessment of the corporal by a qualified military physician. Step aside." Sarah didn't move. "I'm not letting him in." The doctor stepped forward. "Ma'am, I am Major Davis. I'm here to assess the patient's condition." "Then you can assess him from the porch." Sarah shot back. "You're a soldier first and a doctor second. Your primary concern is your chain of command, not the patient's well-being. I won't allow you to compromise his care." Major Davis's jaw tightened. He unzipped his bag, and Sarah caught a glimpse of what was inside. Not a stethoscope or a blood pressure cuff, but pre-filled syringes. Sedatives. This wasn't an assessment. It was a prelude to an abduction. The rage that had been simmering inside her boiled over. "You're not a doctor, you're an orderly with a needle, here to drug him and drag him out like a dog. You think your rank supersedes the Hippocratic Oath? Get off my property." The confrontation was a tense, bitter standoff between two medical professionals on opposite sides of an ethical chasm. The cameras flashed, capturing the raw drama of the moment. Thorne looked ready to physically shove her aside, but the presence of the media held him in check. He was losing control, and it was making him reckless. So he resorted to a weapon that was far crueler and far more effective. 20 minutes later, Sarah's phone rang again. It was an unknown number. She answered, her voice wary. "Is this Sarah Jenkins?" The voice on the other end was a woman's, clipped and bureaucratic. Yes, who is this? This is Martha Hayes from the County Division of Child Protective Services. We've received an anonymous tip expressing serious concern for the welfare of your child, given the unstable and dangerous environment you have created in your home. The floor seemed to drop out from under her. Her son, 8-year-old Leo, was safe with his father 2 states away, a pre-storm arrangement. But the words, the implication, struck her like a physical blow. What? That's insane. My son isn't even here. There is no danger, according to our report. The woman continued, her voice devoid of any emotion. You are harboring a potentially violent military fugitive in a direct armed standoff with federal authorities. This constitutes a grossly negligent environment for a child. We will be opening a full investigation into your parental fitness, Miss Jenkins. A caseworker will be in contact to schedule a home visit and an interview with your son. It was a perfectly executed, soul-crushingly cruel maneuver. Thorne couldn't breach her door, so he had found a way to kick down the door to her life, to threaten the one thing in the world that she loved more than anything. Tears of pure, hot rage welled in her eyes. She felt utterly alone, besieged not just in her house, but in her life. The system wasn't just a machine, it was a monster, and it was trying to devour her whole. She sank onto a chair, the phone clattering from her hand. The weight of it all, her job, her license, her reputation, and now, the threat to her family was crushing her. Alex knelt in front of her, his face a mask of guilt and horror. Sarah, I'm so sorry. This is my fault. Just as the last vestiges of her hope began to fade, she heard a commotion from outside. A new voice was cutting through the noise, loud and authoritative. Peeking through the blinds, she saw a woman in a sharp business suit arguing with the deputies at the police line. She was waving her phone, pointing at Sarah's house, her voice ringing with conviction. That woman in there is a hero, and you are all accomplices to a military cover-up. My name is Jessica Riley. I'm an attorney, and I represent Veterans for Truth. Now, you can either let me through, or I can start naming every statute you're currently violating on live television. A lawyer, a glimmer of light in the suffocating darkness. For the first time in hours, Sarah felt a surge of something other than fear. She felt the will to fight back. The pressure inside the small house had become unbearable, a physical thing that made the air thick and hard to breathe. Outside, the cordon of military police had tightened. Their posture had changed. They were no longer just standing guard, but preparing for action. General Thorne, his patience completely exhausted, was pacing in front of the police line, barking orders into his phone. The final act was about to begin. Alex watched it all, his face pale and drawn. The guilt was eating him alive. He saw the tear tracks on Sarah's face, the slight, terrified tremor in her hands. He had brought this war to her doorstep, and the thought was more painful than any injury. Sarah, he said, his voice quiet but firm. This has to stop. I'm going to walk out there. No, she said instantly, shaking her head. Alex, no. You do that, and your story dies with you. They'll lock you in a dark room somewhere and throw away the key. It's better than them destroying you, he argued, his voice cracking. They're threatening your son, Sarah. Your son? I can't let that happen. This is my fight, not yours. He stood up, his shoulders set, and took a step toward the door. In that moment, Sarah saw the endgame. She saw Alex being dragged away, his evidence confiscated, his truth silenced forever. She saw General Thorne's smug, victorious smirk. She saw the CPS reports, the legal battles, the slow, grinding destruction of her life. She saw the system winning, and a fire ignited in her chest, burning away the fear and leaving behind a core of pure, unyielding defiance. Wait, she commanded, her voice ringing with a newfound strength that made Alex pause. Her eyes darted to the television, where a news anchor was giving a breathless report from outside her house. Then she looked at the lawyer, Jessica Riley, who was still arguing fiercely at the barricade, a bulldog refusing to let go. An idea, desperate and wildly risky, began to form. Jessica, Sarah shouted through the closed door. The lawyer? Outside, the woman's head snapped up. I have a phone. Is there anyone you can call? Anyone who will listen? Jessica's eyes lit up with understanding. She yelled back, her voice cutting through the din. I know the senior producer for the nightly report. He owes me a favor. Can you get on a video call? It was a Hail Mary pass in the final second of the game. Give me the number, Sarah yelled. The lawyer shouted a phone number. Sarah fumbled with her phone, her fingers shaking as she typed. It rang once, twice, and then a man's voice answered. "This is Ben Carter. My name is Sarah Jenkins," she said, speaking fast. "I'm inside the house in North Carolina. Jessica Riley gave me your number. The military is about to breach my door. I have a whistleblower here with evidence of a cover-up. If you want the story, you have about 90 seconds to put me on the air. Live." There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end, then a flurry of muffled shouting. "Okay." Ben's voice came back, electric with urgency. "Okay. I'm sending a video link to your phone right now. Accept it. We're breaking into the national broadcast. Go." The link appeared. Sarah tapped accept. She propped the phone on the mantelpiece, aimed it at the sofa, and pulled Alex down next to her. "Tell them," she whispered, her heart hammering. "Tell them everything." On the small screen, she could see her own terrified, determined face. Then, a voice from the phone's speaker, smooth and professional, filled the room. "We are interrupting this program with breaking news. We're going live to a developing standoff in North Carolina, inside the home of Sarah Jenkins." Outside, a megaphone crackled to life. "Miss Jenkins, this is your final warning. Come out with your hands up." The sharp rap of a battering ram against the front door punctuated the command. On screens across the country, the image of a nurse and a haggard-looking Marine appeared. Sarah spoke first, her voice clear and steady. "My name is Sarah Jenkins. I am a nurse. I am not a hostage. I am protecting a man this country tried to throw away." She gestured to Alex. And Alex, looking directly into the phone's camera, told his story. He spoke of the ambush, of the friends he lost, of the lies in the official report. He held up the flash drive. "This drive has the comms, logs, the real after-action reports. It has the truth. My commanding officers, they covered it up. They called me crazy because they were cowards." He named the officers. He gave the date of the incident. The truth, raw and undeniable, poured out of him. Crack. The front door splintered. In his SUV, General Thorne was watching the live feed on a tablet, his face turning from red to a ghostly white. His phone began to ring, a high, frantic chirping. He ignored it. He was watching his career, his reputation, everything he had built burned to the ground on national television. The phone rang again, insistent. He finally snatched it up. "Thorne," he barked. The voice on the other end was not an aide or a local official. It was a voice from the highest echelons of the Pentagon, a voice that dripped with ice and fury. The command was simple, unequivocal, and absolute. "General, what in the hell is going on down there? You have a direct order. Stand down, now." "Oh." The battering ram was poised to strike again when the order came, screamed from the command post. The MPs froze, confused. The siege, in an instant, was over. Sarah and Alex sat on the couch, breathing heavily in the sudden, deafening silence, the image of their faces still being broadcast to a stunned nation. They had done it. They had faced the monster, and, against all odds, they had won. The aftermath was as surreal as the siege itself. The first change was the departure of General Thorne. He didn't storm away, he simply seemed to deflate, climbing into his SUV with the stiff, mechanical movements of a broken automaton. His vehicles departed without ceremony, a quiet, ignominious retreat. They were replaced within the hour by a different kind of authority. A team from the Department of Defense Inspector General's office arrived. They were quiet, professional, and wore plain clothes. The lead investigator, a woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, approached the now splintered front door and spoke to Sarah not as a criminal, but as a witness. Alex was taken into protective custody. There was no shouting, no force. He was escorted to a waiting car, but not before he turned to Sarah, his eyes filled with a gratitude so immense it needed no words. He simply nodded, a promise and a thank you all in one. He handed the flash drive to the lead investigator, and with it, the truth. The days that followed were a blur. Sarah was, as promised, suspended from the hospital. But the action was met with a tidal wave of public fury. An online fundraiser for her legal defense raised over $100,000 in 24 hours. Veterans groups and nursing unions publicly decried the hospital's actions, hailing Sarah as a hero who embodied the highest principles of care and integrity. Facing a PR disaster of its own, the hospital board hastily reversed its decision and offered her a public apology. The investigation into the cover-up was swift and decisive. General Thorne was formally relieved of his command and forced into early retirement, a quiet end to a disgraced career. The officers Alex had named were court-martialed. The official cause of death for the two young Marines was changed, their families finally given the truth they deserved. 3 months later, a letter arrived. The postmark was from a veterans medical center in Virginia. "Sarah," it began, "I don't know if I'll ever find the right words to thank you. They're helping me here, really helping. I talk about the things I saw, and for the first time, people are listening without judgment. They gave me an honorable discharge. The news reports called you a hero. They don't know the half of it. You didn't just save me from Thorn, you saved me from the storm I've had inside me for years. You reminded me that even when the whole world seems broken, one person's decency can be enough to hold it together. Thank you for opening the door. Your friend, Alex." Sarah folded the letter and looked out her living room window. The new front door was painted a cheerful blue. Outside, the neighbor's fallen oak had been cleared away, and new sunlight was streaming onto a lawn that was slowly turning green again. The scars of the hurricane remained, on the landscape and in her life, but they were healing. She took a sip of her coffee, the morning quiet and blessedly ordinary. She was still just a nurse. But she knew now that even in the face of a storm, one person, armed with nothing but their own conviction, could be a shelter. And that was more than enough.